Welcome to another episode of Raven Conversations. I'm Joe Seamandel, the State Public Affairs Officer for the Washington National Guard. And today I'm joined by Brigadier General Paul Sellars, our Commanding General for the Washington Army National Guard.
Good afternoon.
I've known this individual here since, I was Cadet Seamandel. Yeah. I think we first met in 2007.
Yeah.
My senior year at Central Washington University, and you were one of our ROTC instructors, and now I've got the privilege of serving with you, and now your capacity as the Assistant Adjutant General and Commanding General of the Washington Army National Guard. And
you couldn't get away from me.
That's very true. We've kind of, I think, our paths have kind of crossed 1,000 times. It feels like being in the Guard, but he's here today to share kind of his vision for the Guard, kind of where the Washington Army National Guard is going. Those keys to success, right? As we were saying, no one goes from E2 to 07 overnight. There's lots of things to get there, and advice for younger Guard members. So I appreciate you coming on, sir, and talking with us.
Yep.
So intro and background on yourself.
Let's see. I started out in the Minnesota National Guard back in 1992 when I originally enlisted. I was a college student, and I kind of ran out of money, and I thought, I've always wanted to serve, but I didn't really know in what capacity I wanted to. So I started doing some quick research, and I figured, you know what, the Guard is something I could do where I could continue to finish college, and then, not knowing, being a 19-year-old that didn't still know exactly what I wanted to do in life, I thought, well, this is a good way to kind of dip my toe in and see what the service is like. My dad was in the Navy as a little kid. We moved around a lot, all over the place, and we sort of settled over in Elma for a little while, Washington, west of Olympia, and then we moved to Minnesota. And I was going to college in Wisconsin when I ran out of money. Mm-hmm. And back then, the biggest bonus you could get was $2,000 for an enlistment bonus, which is chump change now.
Yeah.
But back then it was a big deal, and that helped me. I went to basic and AIT, finished up college, and I was able to finish college without owing any money between the GI Bill and student loan repayment plan and the tuition reimbursement that the Minnesota National Guard gave us. So once I finished that up, as soon as I graduated college, I moved back to Washington because I knew there was National Guard Special Forces out here. And I always I was looking for a reason to move back to Washington because I loved growing up out here. And it's just too flat in Minnesota. So I moved out here, and then I started the process. I joined the brigade while I was trying to do the selection process for Special Forces. And then, once I made it through Special Forces, September 11th happened, so I knew there was going to be some deployments involved as a Green Beret. And then, I spent 15 years as a traditional guardsman, M-Day, and then the last 15 years as a AGR, and now as the ATAG.
Yeah.
So that brings me up to today. And in that wild ride in those 30 years was, SF Team Command, SF Company Command, Stryker Battalion Command, Stryker Brigade Command. So I've been in most of the MSCs within the state of Washington, so I've got a good broad experience. And hopefully that in this new role will, add benefit.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I think when I first met you, were coming back off of, I think it was a contracting MOB.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you came into the ROTC program.
Yeah, so I was literally a few weeks out of coming from 9 months in Afghanistan. So I was a little intense back then.
Yeah, I remember a lot of the cadets, they started hearing like, oh man, there's this SF guy coming off of like a contracting MOB, like he's seen some stuff, and I think it was always kind of fun to hear you talk about those stories you were sharing with us, and everybody was just in awe about it. So
yeah.
So you kind of alluded, but how did you learn about the Guard?
Well, my folks were they brought it up to me. They're like, hey, here's some opportunities for you to continue going to school as well as serve. So that's how I looked into it. I didn't know anybody that was in the Guard. My dad's only advice was do anything but the Navy. So I was like, okay, well, I won't do Navy. And I just literally walked into a recruiter's office. I think I talked to a reserve recruiter first. And that sort of fizzled out, and then I was able to find a unit that was close to my home in Minnesota, my folks' place, so I could come home on the weekends once a month from school in Wisconsin, go pack, and drill, and then go back, and it worked out great. Yeah.
Yeah, and if you guys haven't figured out, he's a Midwest guy as well. So that's
it took me a long time to get rid of my Minnesota accent.
It takes a minute. The Wisconsin comes back out of me every once in a while. So kind of getting to the meat and potatoes. You took over as the assistant adjutant general and the commanding general of the Washington Army National Guard back in August when Brigadier General Dent retired. You kind of came in. I loved your speech. You wanted to kind of see this vision and have something. And I think that's a big thing we want to know is kind of what's your vision for the Washington National Guard?
Really, having 31 years in the Guard, each year kind of seems the same. It's kind of a rinse and repeat thing for various reasons. But when I look at what can I bring to the table, how can I move the ball forward for the Washington Army National Guard, it's really to kind of continue to build our proficiency, build our proficient skills, and all. And we've got such a wide variety of skill sets in the Washington Guard. Build that proficiency and our worldwide relevance. We've got things going on in CENTCOM, in U.S. Indo-PACOM, things here, our own training here on IDT and AT. And we've got all of our partners close by, right across the street with First Corps and 7th ID, USERPAC, all of our stuff with our state partners in Thailand and Malaysia. I just want to be able to link all that stuff together. In this role I have, it's kind of unique, so I can reach out to FORCECOM or to National Guard Bureau or our active component partners here on JBLM, as well as USERPAC and U.S. Indo-PACOM, and to help all of our soldiers achieve what they're already going to go do anyway, tie it in with what's happening on their left and right with our partners already downrange. Not just for training exercises, but also our MOBs. We've got military intelligence folks that are mobilized almost constantly, helping with our near-peer adversary efforts in the Pacific, as well as the stuff going on in Europe. My vision for the Guard is we continue to help improve our proficiency, and you just do that on IDT weekends and at AT. It always starts back at the basics. So we just need to be brilliant in the basics and develop our leaders so they understand how to plan and execute good drills. And then my heavy lifting is to go and sell what we're doing to all of our partners so they understand, hey, we're not just swimming in our own lane. We're working the same lines of effort as you guys are for U.S. Indo-PACOM or EUCOM. Let's work together and let's recognize the efforts that each one is doing and how they fit together.
Yeah, and I would assume that's probably the same in the homeland mission, being that dual mission here at home, especially during like any kind of disaster response, building those partnerships.
Absolutely, yeah, and within the state. So yeah, not only our active duty in FORCECOM and National Guard Bureau, but even here within the state. I've spent several days already in this position talking to state representatives and state senators, talking about the good things that we've done in domestic operations, the linkages that we build with local law enforcement, EMD, fire services, the wildfire training that we do every year with the DNR, all of those kinds of things we do at the soldier level. That's just some good training that you could do on the weekend. But as you go up, it's making sure people understand the good things that you're doing and the posture that you have, the readiness that you bring to the table. And by them recognizing that, then that opens up opportunities for us later, whether it's like the bill that the governor just signed today that authorizes retention or a referral bonus for soldiers. So this is kind of a sneak preview because we haven't made public yet, but the governor literally just signed it today and I was there with him. But yeah, that's going to be an added benefit. Those are the kind of benefits that happen because of the efforts that we do on a day-to-day basis. What General Doherty's been doing for a dozen years down in Olympia, helping us out. And we're getting a couple more bills signed probably this next week that help some of the efforts to make your Guard service a little bit easier.
Yeah, and I think this goes back to something General Dent always preached, and that was predictability, right? And we always heard the same thing over and over, is predictability is what helps the Guard. And it sounds like you're just kind of carrying that same tune of if soldiers know what's happening, they feel more comfortable and they're willing to stay here with us.
Yeah.
So I think that predictability thing is huge.
Yeah, I'm not making any huge changes from what the water General Dent carried. The 6 tenets are still in place. We really emphasized, we made a lot of progress on soldier first and soldier centric, meaning what the soldier does and then what the staff does in response. Is now we're continuing progress on those, and I'm looking at emphasizing the brilliance in the basics and the leader development aspects of it. Because I think that's where we can continue to make some improvements without losing sight on all the other stuff.
Yeah, and so with that, we always got to plan for the future, right? And what's that next thing? So what's the future for the Washington Army National Guard?
The future really is the Pacific. And that's where I see, we've got a whole MSC that works mostly in the Pacific. That's where all their partners are within the 56 TIOG. And that's where we have, a near peer threat that is, that links the Washington Army National Guard with our state partners in Malaysia and Thailand that are in the neighborhood. That links us directly to, lines of effort within our national security strategy. So if we're not doing something, all of our efforts and all of our activities should work towards that. And I'm in this position, I can help make sure that all of our lines of effort and all of our activities are tied to those, as well as linking those with our partners. So yeah, I see our futures in the Pacific. We're ready to go anywhere, anytime, because when I was the SOD-P commander, I was working really hard to try and deploy within SOCPAC, within Indo-PACOM. And they all agreed, but that didn't work out. So I ended up going to Afghanistan for my final trip. So we have to be ready to go anywhere at any time. And that's why you just build your brilliance in the basics and your proficiency in your skills, because you don't know where you're going to go.
Yeah.
But where we're oriented mostly is the Pacific. And we've got strong lines already working over there.
Yeah, and we've kind of already started that with the Striker SMEs through SPP. Do we see that as it's kind of similar with the Air is doing now, where they're doing this Enduring Partners thing, where it's like we send people to Thailand, they send people here, and we kind of do that cross training? Is that kind of something you're seeing?
Absolutely, yeah. With the 112 Striker Regiment in Thailand, they've sent people over here last year for Striker maintenance SME. They were on the ground in Yakima for, I think it was like almost a month. We've got a Striker leader SME going over in May, and then also the 5th SFAB is over there at the same time. So it makes sense for us to link up at some point beforehand, make sure that our efforts are streamlined, so we're not trying to teach something contrary to so that we're all on the same sheet of music.
Yeah,
because it really is, in order for us to fight as one team, we got to act like a team.
Yeah. You don't want to have somebody come in and do one thing, and then all of a sudden somebody else comes in.
Hey, ignore everything those SFAB guys said.
They don't know what they're talking about over there.
And that just counteracts all of our efforts.
Yeah. So here at home, probably kind of the same thing, right? And that's always just being prepared, kind of moving forward. And are there any state missions you see in our future that might need to focus on?
Well, every year, annually, is the fires. We never know. Every year's prediction is it could be bad. Okay, well, we'll be ready if it is.
Yeah.
We do all of our training. The state's done a good job of helping support our pre-training at the beginning of the season with the Department of Natural Resources, so that it's not, hey, wait, now there's a fire, quick, let's go train some people. So we'll have the training done before the fire season starts. We've been doing very successful with that at least for the last 5, 6, 7 years, if not probably a dozen years doing it that way. So yeah, there's that, and then of course we're just, with the civil disturbance type events that we had. Hopefully we don't have, part 3 of those types of events, but you always have to be ready. That's part of our job as National Guardsmen. Being Title 32, we have that law enforcement connection that Title 10 doesn't have. So we just have to be ready for that as well.
Yeah.
Those are the kind of big ones, and then you just have to be ready for,
massive
we got
earthquakes, volcanoes, or whatever.
Exactly, and the World Cup is coming in 2026, so we're already starting to plan on, well, how do we do that? There's going to be security issues and concerns where the National Guard can help play a role with local law enforcement to make sure that everyone that comes to visit the World Cup has a pleasant experience when they come to Washington. Yeah.
So kind of speaking of the homeland, and you were kind of unique in the fact that you've sat in the J3, the Joint Operations position. Do you think sitting in these joint positions help, a guardsman as they're kind of planning and seeing the world?
Absolutely. Yeah. It really helps you understand a whole nother, I like to say, a whole other aspect of what National Guard is, like going through the dual status command course and working through the domestic operations authorities, which are different than what we're used to when we go downrange to fight a war. And then working with the personalities of within the emergency management division, as well as talking to counties, county sheriffs, county emergency managers. Yeah, it's important to be able to do that and have that experience and cycle our leadership through there. And we've even talked recently about cycling them through normally it's like at the lieutenant colonel level, but maybe even sooner, because it's important that people understand what does immediate response authority. What does that actually mean?
Yeah.
That doesn't mean call up everybody and tell them to report to the Armory. That's not immediate response. But, if you don't put people through the training, they don't understand exactly what that means. And you can find yourself doing something completely wrong that you don't have the authority to do. And, a sage-like wisdom piece of advice that someone had given me once, we exercise authorities. That's what we do.
Yeah.
If you don't have the authority to do something, you don't do it. And so it's important for us to understand what are those authorities and how do we fit into the overall picture.
Yeah. And I think you've also sat in the G3 side as the ops guy there. How did that kind of give you a perspective sitting in the operations cell at the state level, kind of when it comes to our federal mission? I was the deputy G3 for Colonel at the time, Dent, and then Colonel Hodge. That was a great experience just to work like battle rhythm stuff, to get the machine working, because it's a big bureaucracy. And part of my job responsibility was to cut the fragos and the warnos and issuing orders to the units, and to be able to see how long that takes. And to be able to make sure that our units understood what their missions were as they prepared for, plus their annual training planning. What is my wartime mission? What do I need to be prepared for? And how do I do that over 12 monthly drills and a 15-day AT? That was, going from that, which is all mission focused towards your federal mission, and then just a couple years later, working all the DOM ops when it was very high tempo, because I was put there right when COVID hit. And so I was responsible for training like 1,500 people through civil disturbance training at, very short notice. Yeah.
And it's important to know both aspects.
Yeah. And that kind of leads into my next question, the keys to success. We kind of alluded, no one goes from E2 to 07 overnight. It takes some time and definitely some different ways to get there, different paths to success. So kind of highlight, what those keys to success were for you.
Well, I'll tell you what I tell, when I was the chief of staff, every AGR would come through my office and just try to find out what they want to do for their career and help chart their path. And my advice to them was always be able to carry a heavy rucksack. So if you can do that, and what that literally means is be good at your tactical job, whatever that in the TTP is associated with assaulting a bunker. Be a good staff officer, be able to plan for that type of activities, delegate authority to people for certain things, draw up troops to tasks. So you got a tactical mission. You got to be able to be a good staff officer. You got to be able to. Me as an ops guy, I need to be able. I'm not going to fully understand how to do logistics, but I understand the importance of logistics. I understand the importance of military intelligence and how it fits into the whole cycle of planning. So being able to soak up as much of all of that broad experience as possible, and you're just putting all that in your rucksack, and it's getting heavier and heavier and heavier. But it's not a burden, because it actually makes your job easier. That's what the advice I would give most people. I've had some people even recently say, hey, I want to broaden my experiences and I want to go work in the JOC. And I was just telling somebody earlier today, nobody has actually asked to go there. Usually they're told to go there. But, people are showing interest. I want to understand more of the DOM ops side of the house. So that guy is going to put more in his rucksack, and he's going to be a better full-time staff officer because of that.
Yeah. No, that is an absolutely valuable point to bring in, is just kind of knowing, right, what else is going on around you. Not just what's in your one lane, but kind of the whole guard.
Yeah, and when I was an enlisted guy, I was in a detachment. So the detachment from the company was led by a platoon leader. And I remember thinking on drill weekends, I was like, man, I have no idea what's going on. I want to know more about what's going on. I want to be like that LT who seems to know everything. And so it was my desire to want to know more, I was like, okay, this is how I scrub a vehicle, because I was chemical when I was enlisted. This is how you scrub a vehicle. This is how you make the water go from cold to hot. But I want to understand the bigger picture a little bit more. And having that desire and that yearning to know more about the whole bigger picture and how everything fits together, that's what's going to make you successful.
Yeah. And you bring that M-Day approach too. And that's always a question M-Day officers and enlisted folks have too, is what's the key to success, right? As an M-Day guy, what advice would you give them?
It's a good question, because how do you do that 2 days a month? I mean, I did that for my first 15 years was as an M-Day guy. And I was successful. I really enjoyed it. But especially in leadership positions, even like when I was an SF team leader, I had a lot of responsibilities in between drills just to make sure I was sharp on everything that I needed to know. I didn't have to physically come in and do a whole lot of extra stuff, but on my own time, I was, reading FMs, understanding unconventional warfare, making sure I understood all the terms and terminology, the planning. COIN was becoming a huge thing at that time, so I had to make sure I fully understood the COIN aspect and how SOF works within that. So as an M-Day person, you have to carve out that time. And just like, I had to go to war college. At the same time, I was a battalion commander and a full-time deputy G3 for the state. So I had 3 completely unrelated things that I had to do simultaneously.
Yeah.
And I had to be good at all of them. So I understand, even when I became an AGR, some of my aspects of the way I worked was similar to being an M-Day person. I was getting pulled in all kinds of different directions. And as an SF guy, as full-time, I never was aligned. So I was always doing SF stuff, which was different. I got my PME that I had to do, and then I had my full-time job. So I try to keep that in mind when we look at, the soldier-centric aspect of what we do when we come up with plans and ideas and concepts. How is this going to impact the M-Day soldier who's drinking from a fire hose, and they'll do exactly what we ask them to do if we tell them in a clear, coherent way, this is what needs to happen. They'll get it done. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's a perfect answer. So it kind of leads into transparency, right? You have been, ever since getting in the job, and General Dent kind of started this too, really pushing out a lot of information. I would say from the down rep, the broken compass, everything. It's about letting the M-Day soldier know this is what's happening, this is what's going on, and this is how you can be successful, or this is what's happening, and these are people, and this is the punishments that are happening. And this is another good example of transparency and talking directly to that soldier. So what advice would you give soldiers and how they could be successful in this organization?
Take the tools that you have and use those tools in your leadership, even at the lowest level. If you're a team leader, you need to take ownership of those 3 to 5 bubbas that you have in your team. If you're the squad leader, you got to make sure you're taking time now to give direction to your team leaders about what's going to happen next month. You have to be thinking, especially the officers, you got to be thinking 1, 2, or 3 steps ahead. So you're executing now, and it's always busy. It's always going to be busy now, but you have to unplug, let the people you delegated the responsibility to execute, your NCOs can execute the mission. The commander can come out and start thinking about the next step or 2 steps from now, whether it's next drill, 3 drills, AT. Be able to think ahead and plan ahead, because even if you spend just 5 minutes sitting alone and thinking through a scheme of maneuver on how that next drill is going to work, it's going to be a better drill than if you just waited until that training meeting just before drill when you actually developed your plan. And then, oh, by the way, now that we've got a good plan, we didn't resource it, so now we have to change all of our resourcing. My hope is that all leaders at every level, and like the NCO should be challenging their officers, hey, we haven't prepared yet. We haven't done our troop leading procedures for the activity we're going to do next drill. We need to spend time this drill doing that. If we just did that across the board, at all echelons, we'd be extremely successful.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's critical, right? Always having a plan and not thinking like 30 days out, but thinking 90, 180, 360 days out, kind of not just seeing it from the 50 meter and less shot group, from the 300 meter
exactly.
target kind of group. So yeah, I appreciate that. And one thing I'd like to add in there is I don't think any of this ever happens, right, in the Guard without the support of leadership. And this is kind of a message for anybody watching. Like, once again, I think we're extremely lucky to have you in the seat you are in. I have known you a very long time, and I remember being a young cadet in ROTC, and I wasn't all that young, right? I mean, I had been deployed at that point in my career. Yeah. But you had said, hey, you're going to be an M-Day soldier. You need to focus on your M-Day life outside the Guard. And you kind of said, hey, leadership labs on Thursdays, you don't need to be there. You focus on your class that you have a conflict with. And I always take that and I say that was something that I think meant a lot to me as a college student, knowing I had your support as a leader. And I think that's a big thing. Well,
yeah, and to that point, I say this all the time, especially to my M-Day leaders when I was battalion commander, to my company commanders. The Guard doesn't butter your bread. It doesn't pay the bills. It pays some bills. Maybe it helps you get a fancier car when it's time to buy a new car. But we're not buttering your bread. So as leaders, we need to be flexible enough with our subordinates to allow them to make sure that that one leg, their civilian occupation, that is strong. Because if that's not strong, then their time in the Guard is going to be divided, or they're not going to be focused. So family, work, and Guard, we need to keep all three of those strong in order for it to work. So commanders need to be flexible with their subordinate leaders and the demands in between drills or even on drills. There's really, if you think about it, there's maybe 3 or 4 times an entire year where you really need all your people there. The rest of the time is negotiable, and let leaders at echelon kind of figure that out. But we don't need to be telling people they have to be at drill and they sit on their rucksack all drill and they miss, some family engagement or something like that. We can be realistic. We can be intense, like I can be. I like to joke around, but when it comes to training, it needs to be realistic and hard, and run the soldiers through the gauntlet on the drill weekend, so they go home and they start telling lies about how awesome drill was. And they start exaggerating how cold and wet and everything they were, and then because that's what you owe them as leaders. That's what we owe them: good, hard training. And then hit it again the next month. But you got to be able to step back and plan for those things. Yeah. And be flexible when only make people be there when they really have to be there. Because you're going to find yourself having the actual opposite problem. People are not going to want to just leave. They want to serve their soldiers. A squad leader doesn't want to miss drill. He doesn't want to miss half a drill. He doesn't even want to miss the key collective training portion of drill because he feels the same way. He owes it to his soldiers to be there. So you're actually going to have, with being flexible, you're actually going to have the opposite problem. You're going to have people go, oh, I can't give it 100%, so I'm just going to get out of the Guard. No, I'll take you at 50%. Yeah. And getting them comfortable with that, because I'd rather have you at 50% now and 100% when a crisis hits than ask 100% of you now and push you out. Yeah, that's extremely valuable point, sir. I think that's having you at 100% when that crisis happens. Yeah. That's more important. Because that's the great thing about the Guard. When a crisis happens, whether it's a civil disturbance, a fire, floods, they will beat down the door of the armory to go help their fellow citizen, and they'll stop doing whatever they're doing to go do that. Yeah. So anything you want to add into closing here? Just that, I love this job so far. I've been here, about 8 months now in this new position. I love every day. And, my door's open. If people have questions, comments, concerns, I have no problem beating up my staff to make sure that the soldiers have a good Guard experience. Yeah, no, I appreciate that, sir. If you want to ask General Soldier a question, you can put it in the comments. We'll definitely pass that along to him. He'd probably be interested in hearing some people's comments. If you like the video, give it a like. Make sure to subscribe for future videos. And thanks for joining us, sir. We appreciate it. Thank you, Joe.